After the galaxy-spanning disaster that was the Horus Heresy, the Imperium took a long, hard look at the smoldering wreckage of human civilization and decided that the best solution was, naturally, religious fanaticism. Because nothing holds a crumbling empire together like fear, fire, and a mandatory belief system enforced at gunpoint. What began as a fringe cult screaming that the Emperor was a literal god, transformed into the Adeptus Ministorum, the galaxy's largest and most terrifying church. And once they got their hands on real power, well, things escalated quickly. Turns out, when you mix divine authority with bureaucratic overreach, you get an unstoppable juggernaut of faith-fueled oppression. The Ecclesiarchy isn't just about preaching piety, it's a sprawling empire within the Imperium itself, controlling everything from local sermons to galaxy-wide crusades. They can bless you, they can damn you, and if they really don't like you, they'll burn you alive while chanting hymns. For 10,000 years, they've turned blind devotion into a political machine that feeds off faith and blood in equal measure. From the blood-soaked madness of the age of apostasy to their legal loophole, nuns with guns, the Ecclesiarchy has perfected the art of ruling through fear while wearing the mask of righteousness. The Ecclesiarchy wasn't part of the Emperor's grand plan. Hell, it's the exact opposite of everything he wanted. He didn't march across the galaxy to build a cosmic mega-church. He wanted a rational, secular empire where people worshipped things like science and logic, not his shiny golden ass. But the moment Big E got throne-locked and the galaxy collectively lost its mind, the religious nuts crawled out of the woodwork like cockroaches, and the biggest, meanest cockroaches of them all built what became the Ecclesiarchy. It all started with the Lectitio Divinitatus, a little heretical fan fiction cooked up by Lorgar, the galaxy's first and most insufferable zealot. He somehow decided that the Emperor was indeed a god, and no, his dad doesn't get a say in the matter. While the Emperor was busy trying to keep the Imperium from imploding, that book spread like a disease. By the time the dust settled after the Horus Heresy, people weren't just calling the Emperor a god. They needed him to be one. A broken empire clinging to survival doesn't ask questions. It just wants something, anything, to believe in. And the Ecclesiarchy, they were more than happy to provide. They took the Lectitio Divinitatus, slapped a holy seal on it, and turned it into the foundation for the imperial cult. Suddenly, faith wasn't just a personal thing. It was a mandatory subscription service, and opting out came with a free execution. As the centuries rolled on, the Ecclesiarchy sank its claws deeper, consolidating power and turning the Imperium into one giant, theocratic death cult. The Emperor might have wanted reason and logic, but what he got was a galaxy where the loudest guy with a flamethrower gets the last word. And as long as humanity keeps praying and burning anything that looks even slightly heretical, the Ecclesiarchy stays on top. If the Ecclesiarchy's rise was a slow-burn heretical takeover, their consolidation of power was a full-blown holy blitzkrieg. Faith wasn't just a comforting illusion. It became a tool of pure, uncut domination. And the Ecclesiarchy, they didn't just preach from gilded pulpits. They turned belief into a bludgeon and beat the galaxy into submission with it. If you weren't praying, you were burning, and sometimes both at the same time. The trick was simple. If you control what people believe, you control everything. The Ecclesiarchy knew that faith wasn't just about making people kneel. It was about making them obey. They rewrote reality through scripture, declaring the Emperor a god and themselves his mouthpiece. And with the galaxy still reeling from the Horus Heresy, nobody was in a position to argue. Trillions of terrified humans clung to faith like a life raft, and the Ecclesiarchy happily steered that raft straight into an ocean of fire and fanaticism. And just to make sure no one got any funny ideas about thinking for themselves, they rolled out the Missionaris Galaxia, a cheerful band of zealots sent to convert or purge every backwater hellhole in the galaxy. Their job? Spread the imperial cult to the darkest corners of the cosmos and snuff out anything that so much as smelled like heresy. This wasn't charity work. This was ideological carpet bombing. Entire worlds were brought to heel under the boot of faith, and those who didn't comply got the torch. If you couldn't say, "The Emperor protects," without pissing yourself in fear, you weren't going to last long. By the time the Ecclesiarchy was done, faith wasn't just part of the Imperium. It was the Imperium. Every aspect of life, from birth to death, was drowned in religious dogma. And in the eyes of the Ecclesiarchy, that wasn't just a victory, it was divine destiny. With belief as both shield and sword, they didn't just rule, they owned humanity's soul, and they weren't about to let it go. So, as a result of going a little bit too crazy, the Ecclesiarchy got slapped with a galactic restraining order. No more men under arms. You'd think that would curb their whole faith through fire routine, but no. Instead, they found the mother of all legal loopholes. If men aren't allowed to carry guns, why not send in the women? That's how we got the Adepta Sororitas, the galaxy's most terrifying technicality. These power-armored zealots are the Ecclesiarchy's answer to any problem that can be solved with massed bolter fire, which, in the grim darkness of the far future, is pretty much every problem. Their origin story is a cocktail of religious extremism and legal gymnastics. After Goge Vandire's reign of blood-soaked lunacy finally collapsed, the Imperium decided, quite sensibly, that maybe giving the Church its own private murder army wasn't a great idea. The decree passive forbade the Ecclesiarchy from maintaining men under arms, but in a legal interpretation only the most pious and deeply insane could love, women weren't included. Thus, the daughters of the Emperor were rebranded as the Adepta Sororitas, and the Ecclesiarchy got to keep its holy hit squad without technically breaking the rules. A divine loophole, if you will. And oh, they're not just legal, they're terrifying. Clad in black and red ceramite and wielding weapons that would make an Astartes nod in approval, the Sisters of Battle wage war in the Emperor's name with a zeal so intense it bends reality, literally. Their faith is so overwhelming that the laws of physics sometimes just give up. Bullets ricochet off them for no reason. Grievous wounds close through sheer willpower, and entire battlefields ignite in holy fire because someone said a really good prayer. The Adepta Sororitas also serve another vital function: beating everyone else into compliance. You can preach the Emperor's word all you want, but nothing drives the message home, quite like a 7-foot-tall nun immolating a heretic with a flamethrower. Through them, the Ecclesiarchy keeps the Imperium's faith burning, sometimes literally, while maintaining the thin illusion that they're still playing by the rules. It's the ultimate power move, bending both laws and reality through the sheer force of religious audacity. If you thought the Ecclesiarchy's main gig was bad, wait until you meet their extended family, an endless sea of cults, sects, and fanatics, each more unhinged than the last. Officially, these groups all serve the God Emperor. Unofficially, they're a chaotic mess of apocalyptic lunatics, doomsday prophets, and self-flagellating weirdos who believe salvation comes from suffering, usually yours, not theirs. The Imperium tolerates this madness because, hey, As long as they're worshipping the Emperor and not summoning demons, it's all good. But in practice, these cults are the perfect tool for the Ecclesiarchy to keep the masses obedient, terrified, and too busy flogging themselves to question why their rulers live in golden palaces. These groups range from the mildly disturbing to the outright psychotic. You've got the redemptionists, who believe the galaxy can only be purified through flame, and, conveniently, lots of public executions. Then there are the Frateris militia, basically a never-ending supply of meat shields who charge into battle armed with rusty shotguns and blind faith. And let's not forget the flagellant pilgrim cults, who think dragging their half-dead bodies across entire planets is the express lane to spiritual enlightenment. Whether they're burning heretics, flaying sinners, or screaming themselves hoarse in the middle of a hive city, these sects ensure that no one in the Imperium ever forgets that faith isn't just belief, it's pain. And speaking of pain, let's talk about pilgrimages, because nothing says pious devotion like traveling across a war-torn hellscape to visit a shrine that may or may not still exist. Pilgrimage routes crisscross the galaxy, leading the faithful to holy sites where miracles allegedly happened. Entire planets, shrine worlds, are dedicated to preserving these sacred places, which is a nice way of saying they're overcrowded, disease-ridden death traps where millions gather to pray and occasionally drop dead. And when the faithful arrive, the Ecclesiarchy is there to squeeze every last ounce of faith and every last credit out of them. Tithes, relic fees, indulgences for your sins, if it can be taxed, the Ecclesiarchy will slap a price tag on it. Holiness, after all, is expensive. But make no mistake, this isn't just a tourist racket. Pilgrimages and cults are weapons, sharpened to keep the Imperium in line. A few billion desperate souls trudging through the stars in the name of faith might seem harmless, but when the Ecclesiarchy wants to send a message, they'll point that holy mob at anyone who steps out of line. Planets that dare resist the Emperor's will often find themselves swarmed by angry zealots eager to burn everything that looks remotely heretical. The Imperium isn't just held together by bureaucracy and bolters, it's held together by billions of terrified believers, all convinced that if they stop worshipping for even a second, the galaxy will burn. And the worst part? They might not be wrong. At its core, the Ecclesiarchy isn't about spreading faith. It's about wielding it like a bludgeon. Sure, they preach about the God Emperor's divine will, but let's be honest, their real gospel is power. Every sermon, every shrine, and every mass execution is part of a galaxy-spanning empire built on control. Faith isn't just a belief system, it's the leash they wrap around trillions of necks. And if you think this holy institution is above a little greed and hypocrisy, you must be new here. The Ecclesiarchy has turned religious devotion into the most profitable scam in the galaxy, and they're not even subtle about it. Take the tithe of faith, for example, a system where entire star systems are taxed in the Emperor's name. The Ecclesiarchy demands offerings, ranging from cold, hard resources to priceless relics, and if a planet can't pay up, well, nothing says faith enforcement like a few billion angry zealots showing up with torches. It's a divine pyramid scheme where the faithful work themselves to death while the upper echelons of the Ministorum live in unimaginable luxury. While hive cities choke on pollution and starvation, the cardinals of the Ecclesiarchy dine on delicacies from 1,000 worlds, draped in enough gold to make a rogue trader blush. For an organization obsessed with humility and sacrifice, they sure as hell don't practice it themselves. But the funniest part? The Ecclesiarchy doesn't just exploit the Imperium, they are the Imperium. They're woven into the very machinery of galactic governance, using faith to enforce obedience where even the Adeptus Terra struggles. When the High Lords want a planet brought to heel, they don't always send the Astra Militarum. Sometimes, a well-timed sermon can break a world faster than a bombardment. And if that doesn't work, there's always the Frateris Militia, a disposable horde of religious fanatics who'll gladly die screaming the Emperor's name. It's faith-based imperialism at its finest. And here's the punchline. For all their piety, the Ecclesiarchy doesn't actually care what you believe, as long as you kneel. Orthodoxy is a moving target, and they'll redefine heresy at the drop of a hat if it means keeping their grip on power. One day, you're a loyal believer. The next, you're burning at the stake because some cardinal decided your prayers weren't submissive and breedable enough. It's a brutal, exploitative machine, dressed up in holy robes, and as long as the God Emperor sits on that golden toilet, the Ecclesiarchy will keep the faith and keep cashing in on it. The Ecclesiarchy is a towering monument to what happens when blind faith meets unchecked power. What began as a fringe cult exploded into a galaxy-spanning empire of gold, fire, and hypocrisy, preaching humility while draining entire star systems dry. Yet, for all their corruption, their faith is no joke. In the grimdark future, belief bends reality, and the Ecclesiarchy's fanatical devotion fuels miracles that defy logic. As long as there are heretics to burn and tithes to collect, they'll keep praying harder, and the galaxy will keep paying the price. If you enjoyed this dive into the Imperium's most fanatical overlords, like and subscribe for more, because the Emperor protects, but engagement algorithms do it better. That's all for today, folks. Peace.